Welcome along to another episode of the Play On podcast. I'm David Simmonds, and as always, I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues Stephen Commins and Anthony Brown. Thanks for coming on the show, guys. What a week it's been since we were last on air. Just when you thought that 2020 couldn't get any more crazier, we have gone and qualified for the Euros. 22 years. Anthony, how's it taken us 22 years to get to this stage, mate?
That could take us forever to answer that question, but it certainly feels good to have ended it. I mean, I think probably a lot of us were starting to feel we'd never get back to a major tournament. As I said last week, I used to be really passionate about the national team. I used to go and watch some away games as a fan. I remember being in Amsterdam and Oslo in sort of 2003, 2005. Used to go to all the home games. More recently, I've found it hard to sort of engage with the national team. I don't know why that is. It just seems like there's been a general apathy, and it's obviously not qualifying for a tournament hasn't helped in that regard, but certainly, as I said last week, in the lead up to the game, I could feel a vibe building among the country, and it was proven correct in what happened on Thursday night, because, I mean, I think the whole nation's been sort of smiling together almost since Thursday night. It's been a great sort of antidote, I suppose, to all the negativity of the year and everything that's been associated with the national team over the last 22 years. It feels like everybody's had a weight lifted off their shoulders, everybody's talking about it, the whole country's on a high. It's great. Yeah,
it's brilliant. Everybody's buzzing. Every social media that you go on, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or wherever, Instagram, everybody's talking about it, and there's obviously a certain song that's getting retweeted, and it's just mental. That's 2020 summed up. Stephen, we're off to the Euros. It's like I say, it's been 22 years. On Monday the 14th of June, we will play Hampden. We'll play the Czech Republic there. On Friday the 18th, we're down at Wembley. We play the old enemy, England. On the Friday night, a 9 o'clock kickoff, which is a bit crazy. And on the Tuesday, we're back up the road, the 22nd at Hampden against Croatia. How important is it having two fixtures in our back garden at Hampden?
I think there's a romantic part of me that thinks it would be so much better if it was just like a normal tournament and it was away in a country, and the Scotland fans would get to go and have like a 2-3 week holiday and get all the games in. But the way that the tournament's set up, it's actually potentially going to work out pretty well for Scotland, because obviously that's well documented, they've never, even when they have got to these major tournaments, they've never got beyond the group stage. So you look at that group, and out with England, obviously England's going to be a tough game, but again, anything can happen, but those other two games at Hampden, you potentially fancy your chances. Like Czech Republic, they've just recently beat the Czech Republic, home and away. Well, obviously there was different circumstances involved. Croatia are an aging team, so there is a good chance that Scotland could. I mean, I know we're potentially counting our chickens before they've hatched here, but they've got as good a chance as ever to kind of go and actually maybe do something in the tournament. So
yeah, definitely. And like every week, we are fully interactive, guys. Please drop us a message, anything that we're talking about. Please comment on it. Anything you want us to talk about, please drop it on there. Hi to Fraser. Good choice of tap, Davey. There's a bit of a story behind that. So one of our fellow employees here at State of Mind, I said to him last week, I said, see if we qualify. If we qualify, I'll do next week's show in a kilt and a Scotland top, a See You Jimmy hat, and I'll have a big St Andrew's cross flag. So I've not got a kilt, but as you've all seen, I've got, for a long time, a head of hair and the St Andrew's cross. Hey, we're off to the Euros. Right, that's coming straight back off.
So, I mean, I can safely say, having known you all these years, that's actually better than what your actual hair looked like. So, that's actually doing you a bit of a service, mate.
Aye, cheers, mate. So, I mean, are we getting carried away, guys? I mean, we've qualified for the Euros. Or are we right to get carried away? Should we milk this for all it is, Anthony?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's been Scotland's holy grail to qualify for a tournament. I mean, yeah, if you're a country of England's calibre, for instance, you look and you qualify for every tournament, so it's not a big deal. But for Scotland, that's been all we've been looking to do over the last 2 decades, basically, and we've done it. I mean, obviously, you want to go to the tournament and make as good an impact as you can. And as Stephen said, I actually think they've got a decent chance of, I'm not saying they will get out of the group, but it's certainly not beyond possibilities. It could have been more formidable, certainly. I mean, you see these groups of deaths at all these tournaments, and I wouldn't call that a group of death from Scotland's perspective. It's a tough group. Scotland will probably be the outsiders of the four, but the two home games will certainly, could be a leveller in terms of the Czech Republic, certainly, and obviously Croatia would still, I would imagine, be favourites going into that game. Scotland at home to Croatia with a Hampden crowd behind them, assuming supporters are allowed in, you'd fancy them with it. If there's that same positivity that there has been over the past few weeks, and certainly over the past few days, the whole build-up to this tournament is going to be utterly incredible in terms of Scotland. It's going to be, I mean, again, you could say it could be to the detriment because there'll be so much pressure on the players, but it can't be any bigger than the pressure they faced on Thursday night.
Yeah.
So I think they've got I mean, you enjoy getting there, of course you do. You celebrate it, you savour it, and I mean, the players have done that, and it showed in the fact that Steve Clarke left most of them out in yesterday's game. Presumably they had a pretty good time on Thursday, but we know they had a good time on Thursday night, and they were absolutely right to do so.
Yeah, I mean, we've went through our fair share of national managers, Stephen. Is Steve Clarke now the man that's really going to kick us on?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at what's the evidence in front of you. I mean, before Steve Clarke got the job, he's one that you would have looked at, and he's kind of, what you see is what you get. He does exactly what it says on the tin. He's pragmatic. He's organised. He gets teams who, I mean, if you look at his record when he was the Kilmarnock manager, he took a club in Kilmarnock who were they were in absolute turmoil when he went in there. Like boardroom level, club level, the supporters had basically almost turned their back on the club and stuff. And with the help of a really good chairman, I think, in Billy Bowie, and the sort of support staff he brought in the management side of things, he made that Killie team into, like, as you say, not world beaters, but he got the best out of that group that he had. And he managed to bring in certain players in certain positions, people who hadn't been fancied at other places. Eamon Brophy couldn't get a game for Hamilton, came in, did a really good job for him at Killie. Stephen O'Donnell had been I think down south, he'd been he'd failed at Celtic, and came there, did a great job for him. So he kind of was used to working with what he had. So he was almost a perfect choice for a national team manager, in that he was going to come in there and not be able to just go to the market and pick and choose who he was going to have. He had a core group of guys. He could maybe try and pull in guys like Lyndon Dykes, but he was going to have to find a system that worked for the people who were available to him. And it maybe took him a wee while. He tried loads of different things, and then obviously there was a bit of a kind of backlash when he went to the back three and moved McTominay into that back three. A lot of people were sort of saying, oh, maybe he's pushed this a bit too far here, and we don't know if he might not last much longer. But he stuck with it. And I mean, that's not to say that they're going to go to the Euros and play that system and McTominay, but they've definitely found something there that works for what they have, because the last two performances for Scotland, like, as I've said last week, I'm not the biggest Scotland fan. I can't say that I've like forensically watched a lot, like every single game that they've played, but that's the best I've seen Scotland play for a long, long time. So he's obviously doing something right.
On paper, he now looks like a football and miracle worker, Steve Clarke. His last job at Killie, as you say, I mean, he took Kilmarnock way beyond what people would have expected of him in terms of getting them into Europe from where he picked them up, with the bottom of the table when he came in and replaced Lee McCulloch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what he did there was a miracle in itself. And then, I mean, I know Scotland ultimately to qualify, you could argue that they had a more straightforward path because they only had to win a relatively weak Nations League and then beat a Serbia team that were clearly a bit flaky on the night in the playoff, and obviously they beat Israel in penalties. So you could argue it wasn't a miracle in the sense of the games that they actually won, but just the fact he's ended this period of the wilderness years, if you like, for Scotland at the first attempt.
See, this is the thing, like, so it's a very Scottish thing. Like the question that you asked Anthony earlier when you were said, are we getting ahead of ourselves? Should we not be celebrating too much? Like, nobody ever said that to Liverpool fans or Leeds fans when they ended the hoodoos that they had. So why should Scotland fans feel guilty about celebrating something that for pretty much all our lifetimes, like obviously we're all, I'm actually a bit older than you probably think I am because I'm baby-faced and beautiful, but from our generation, like I was 13 the last time Scotland were at a major tournament, so like in my adult life I've never seen it, so why shouldn't you celebrate something like that? So yeah, it is something that we should definitely hold on to, and the feel-good factor should hopefully go all the way through to the summer.
Absolutely. Thanks for all the messages that are coming in. Please do keep them coming. Hi to a good friend of mine, David Livy. Great show, lads. The most hair I've seen on Simmy since he sprayed it on his wedding day. Fake news, sorry guys, fake news. I do apologise for that. This is the fittest Scotland squad I've seen in a long time. Solid midfield and an absolute nuisance up front. That's to Sean McCrory as well. Thank you very much for the comment. I agree, we do look like sorry guys, this has to come off. It's roasting in here. We do look a really fit, a really young, like a good core team. Would you agree? I mean, it's a question I'm going to ask later on, but I'm just going to jump in with it now, okay? There's players in that Scotland team that should be playing at a higher level, and the player that I'm talking about here is Ryan Christie. Okay, if you look at players like Stuart Armstrong, you've got John McGinn, Tierney, that have all went down to the Premiership and succeeded. They're doing well down there. Is Ryan Christie maybe the next man to follow suit down that way?
It's a tough one because you never know. Like there's guys who. There's guys who I looked at when they're playing in Scotland and think he is absolutely like perfect for going down south. Like a perfect example, that's Callum Patterson when he was at Hearts. I looked at him and thought he will go down. He'll do what John McGinn's done basically. He'll go down to a club that's potentially at a level above where he is at Hearts, and in John McGinn's case, Hibs. They went to Aston Villa and straight away. He looks unbelievable for Villa. He's going to, like, for me, he should take that step up again and go to the next level, which like would be maybe a top 6 team in England. I thought Callum Patterson would do the exact same thing. I mean, not to throw any shade on Callum Patterson's career because he's still playing for Sheffield Wednesday, a great club, and he's still in the Scotland squad. But I really expected him to be at the level of John McGinn. So a guy like Ryan Christie, even though he's playing at a high level, he's playing at the best club in Scotland at this moment in time. He's playing regularly in Europe. He's playing well for the national team. I just think, with the money that's involved, the contract that he's probably on at Celtic, it's a matter of time before one of the clubs in England, because even the bottom 6 clubs in England could probably offer treble, quadruple what he's earning now at Celtic. So I think it's a matter of time. He's got all the attributes that he could go there and do a good job. Absolutely.
I mean, it's a shame on this player that I'm going to bring up now, Olly Mcbonney. He's playing in the Premiership. He's not been producing the goods for Scotland. If he can do it down there, surely Ryan Christie can. Even McGregor. And now I'm not trying to take anything away from Celtic, because I'm sure there is other people in that squad as well that would probably do a job in the Premier League. But I can see money moves coming in for them. Now, one thing I do want to say, Anthony, and hopefully you can jump in on this, is we're getting carried away here. I mean, I'm wearing See You Jimmy hats on here. We're wearing Scotland tops. We're sharing 80s music, for crying out loud, on all social platforms. Are we getting carried away because there is still a pandemic going on? Let's be serious here. I mean, going into next year, they're promising a vaccine. I mean, how detrimental will a tournament like this be in our back garden if we can't actually attend due to COVID?
That would be a travesty in the football sense if that can't happen. And I suppose the worry is that they just decide to take it to one particular country. Obviously, Russia's been mooted. Yep. I don't know how much substance there is to that. So it would be a shame if it did get taken behind closed doors, whether it's all around Europe or just in one particular country. You would certainly hope that a good amount of fans, ideally full houses, are going to be allowed in. I mean, that's the big thing that everybody's going to be watching. And the problem is they're going to have to make a decision relatively soon about what they're going to do with it, because although the tournament's still 6-7 months away, they are going to have make a decision at some point. And it may be that they have to make that decision in January or February, for instance, when we may not be fully aware of how this COVID thing's going to evolve and whether we are going to be able to access a vaccine by that point. So there's a lot of question marks about whether... I mean, I've bought tickets for a game in Copenhagen to take my wee boy, the right. Denmark-Belgium game, so I'm watching it from that regard. I've booked flights to Copenhagen, and I don't know whether to book a hotel, because I don't know if it's going to go ahead there as planned or if they're going to shuffle it elsewhere. I mean, nobody really knows at this point, so you've just got to assume it's going to go ahead as planned until told otherwise. But yeah, it would be a real shame if the first tournament Scotland... I mean, it's bad enough that Scotland qualified with no fans in the stadium.
Yep. But
to then go to the tournament with no fans in it, that would be typically Scottish, I suppose.
The thing is, as well, like, you're talking about it from, like, would Scotland have that big advantage if they were playing 2 of the 3 group games at Hampden with a crowd? Yeah. Without a crowd, is it that different to going somewhere and being based in a hotel and, like, say, Russia, for example, is it that different to go having somewhere in Russia as your base and go to the games from there? And also, you've got to remember, like, especially, like, obviously England and Croatia, they've all got players who have played in pretty important games, like World Cup final, World Cup semi-finals. Like, our group of guys, we've got a lot of people with good club experience, but international tournament experience, none, zero. So having them go there with no fans, is that potentially going to play into our hands maybe? Because
in a football
just from a football point of view,
you've got to think of what it means to the nation.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, just from a pure football point of view, like as we said last week, going to Serbia with a crowd in there would have been a lot harder than what they actually faced when they went there. Absolutely. It was more of a footballing experience than a trying to get your mentality right, try to keep your mind on the game. There was less distractions there, so. Maybe without the distraction, Scotland will be European champions. Like, who knows?
The way Serbia came on strong after just before they got the equaliser and then in extra time, I think if they'd had a home support willing them on, they probably would have forced the door.
It would have been different, yeah.
So I definitely think you could say having no fans there helped Scotland in that instance.
But absolutely, and obviously, as you'll see on the screen just now, guys, AJSC Technology Videos agrees with what you said, Stephen. Maybe playing at Wembley with no crowd might actually help us.
Yeah, it's one of these. Like, the thing is, if you balance it up though, like you look at that and go, would you give up having fans there to get Scotland out that group? Absolutely not. Like, not from my own personal point of view, but the people who I know that I'm close to who are massive Scotland fans, if you took the opportunity to actually go to a game or experience something like that away from them, like you need to try and do everything to get fans to these stadiums. Obviously within reason, make sure it's as safe as possible, but like, yeah, do everything possible to try and get this, because the world, and especially this country, needs something like that.
Absolutely. And obviously the worry with the pandemic is, whether you have a ticket or not, I think there's going to be a large volume of Scottish supporters just jump on that train, book a flight, hire a minibus and head down to Trafalgar Square. I mean, you can all see that happening. I mean, I know some of us in this room have already booked hotel rooms.
I've not been to a Scotland game since about 1998, but as soon as the full-time whistle went, I was booked and ready to go.
Well, I mean, that can only be good for the economy, surely, all the amount of Scottish people that are going to go down there. But hey, that's the other side of the coin. So let's talk about the game itself. We've just bypassed the whole game itself. 1-1 at full-time, penalties, and we all know what happened there. Last week on the show, this is where I was getting worried, Stephen, because on the first show you predicted that Craig Gordon should get a Scotland call-up. He gets a Scotland call-up. Last week on the show, I asked you what your score thought it was going to be, and you said 1-1 and we'll get beat on penalties.
To be honest, I actually said 0-0. So
oh, did you?
It wasn't that mystic, Meg. But yeah, I did think draw, then to penalties. I thought, oh no, I'm going to get slaughtered. It was basically going to be my fault on this podcast if Scotland go out here. But no, fair play to them. I mean, you look at the way that the game went as well. That you had such a positive start to the game. They were on the front foot. It's almost like they got the game plan spot on, like absolutely perfect. Like obviously Kolarov was missing for the Serbians as well, so they had to. I think one of the guys who played in the back three is actually a holding midfielder. So I think Steve Clark had obviously looked at that and thought they're going to be comfortable on the ball, so they're probably going to try and play for the back. And from the word go, Dykes was absolutely incredible. Yeah, like, what a performance. He battled with at least two centre halves at a time, and then you had press from McGinn, for Christie, you had the whole team were pressing as a group, and to have that standard of a performance, and then for a last second header to come in, it was just written in the stars. I thought, there was nothing more Scottish than this.
Yeah, there was a real sense of negativity during the sort of extra time period. I mean, you could hear it even in the Ian Crocker's voice in Sky, and you just thought Scotland are just waiting to get eliminated here, because it just been like the life had been just knocked out of them, because they had, as you say, they'd played so well for 85 minutes and they looked in total control. They looked comfortable on the ball, really confident, really composed, playing with purpose. And Serbia looked really flat. I don't know if that was Scotland stifling them or if Serbia I don't know what happened there, but until Serbia got the goal, they didn't really look a threat. And then as soon as they got the goal, obviously the game completely flipped, went the other way. Serbia started chucking balls in the box and generally pressing, and you started to think Scotland and they had a few little half chances in extra time, didn't they, Serbia? And you're starting to think you're just counting the seconds still.
Well, Marshall actually made a great save in extra time as well. Like, people forget that. Like, obviously everyone will talk about the penalty save, but the save he had from, I don't know what the boy's name was, but the drive at the edge of the box and he just got fingertips to it and tipped it around the post. I mean, that's a brilliant save at that moment in time, and really kept us in the game, because, as you say, the pressure was just building and building and building. And the strange thing was, I know that you obviously picked up on the McBurney stuff earlier on, and he's a bit kind of guy under fire, but like, they'd come onto that game, Steve Clarke had made those substitutions, and it'll be glossed over now, but if Scotland had lost that game, he would have been slaughtered, because he took off the three guys who had done everything that he'd asked them to do. And don't get me wrong, what I think a lot of people forget is to play that system and the high press that they did, the intensity that those guys were going to have to be working at, that like, he wasn't going to get any more out of John McGinn or Ryan Christie or Lyndon Dykes. They'd run the race.
They'd run their race.
Yeah, they'd run their race. So, but those other guys coming onto that game, they just looked like in the extra time, McBurney and Patterson, they looked more tired than anybody else, and they'd just come on. So it was just one of those ones where
so the game had probably swung that much in Serbia's favour that, I mean, people look and say it was automatically substitutes. From a manager's perspective, he's putting fresh legs on to try and see out a victory.
Yeah.
And Patterson can run, we all know he can run, he can press. McBurney obviously is used to playing that position, although he's not done it for Scotland to a high standard. He's obviously done something in England, people rate him, and he does do a job at club level. So he's put these boys on, probably thinking we're in so much control here, it doesn't matter who I put on. I mean, people argue that he should have put Griffiths on, but there's a lot of question marks about Griffiths' fitness and other things at the moment, so Steve Clarke's better equipped than us to decide whether it should be Lee Griffiths or Olly Mcbonney that goes on the pitch. Mm-hmm. And obviously losing the goal so soon, it suddenly changes the dynamic and the way everything's... And it puts pressure on. I think it was Gordon Strachan said it the other day. The likes of Patterson and McBurney are suddenly... It's not necessarily their fault, but they're in a Scotland team that's struggling to hold their own because the tide's turned through getting that goal. Goals change games. It's a cliche, it's basic, but... It's true.
Absolutely. Something else Gordon Strachan said, which AGSE Technology Videos has posted again, he thought Serbia didn't really know how to play against us, didn't expect our quality of pressing, and you talked on the high press that we did. Serbia also thought they could play through us, so they did massively underestimate us. Do you think that maybe played a part as well? Did they underestimate the sort of tactical awareness that we were going to bring into that game?
It's tough to say. I mean, you said last week that you'd kind of done a little bit of research on Serbia's last few results and the people who they'd beat, and I think one of the viewers had said that their home record was really bad, and like, I don't really know enough about the Serbian national team to tell you if that's the way that they always play, but I just didn't see anything from them. Like Milinkovic-Savic, who is one of the highest profile midfielders in Europe, he's constantly linked with these people. He was just anonymous. It's like he was just playing in a pre-season friendly. Like, that's a high-profile game for them as well, because as much as they've been at World Cups and stuff, I don't think they've qualified for a Euros either since they were in Yugoslavia, I think. But it's so it's a big game for them, and I don't know whether they underestimated it or there was definitely something that wasn't quite right with them. I just think that they probably weren't expecting the tidal wave of energy and high press that they got. Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned earlier, Stephen, the performance that Dykes put in. Does he bring a dimension to that Scotland squad, Anthony, that we've maybe not seen in a while?
Yeah, he's like a Kenny Miller type, but with a bit more natural physical presence, I feel like, because he's one of these selfless strikers that runs the channels. He'll do all the dog work, if you like. And I always rated Miller for what he brought to Scotland. I know a lot of people criticised him because he missed a lot of chances, but I thought he was a really good sort of focal point for Scotland, and I don't think we ever really replaced him. I know Griffiths had a little spell where he was going to look like he was going to become a talisman when he scored against England, and Stephen Fletcher obviously had a shot, but it never really took off for him on a consistent basis. But certainly Dykes looks like he's got the ability, and he's got the legs to play that role where you're just running yourself into the ground for the team, holding the ball up, going and fighting defenders, and he's got a bit of quality as well. I mean, he certainly looks perfect. Like, I mean, you could put in a guy like Shanklin, for instance, or a Griffiths, but do they have that same presence that Dykes is bringing to the party? I don't think they do.
Yeah, and from one end of the pitch to the other, a man that we always have to talk about is Sir David of Marshall, if you like. Is that a 2020 version of the Archie Gemmill moment? Is that one that we're going to see repeated, that penalty save year after year after year now?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of the next generation, our generation, one that you're going to see over and over again, just because of what had come previous to that for the last 22 years. But the best thing that I saw throughout this whole thing was how much, it didn't matter whether it was McFadden and Darren Fletcher on the programme, if you listen to anybody on podcasts or radio shows, or the feeling of just how happy people were for David Marshall on a personal level, just because I saw a thing that was brilliant, was if you look at Craig Gordon, Alan McGregor and David Marshall, who have all come through the Scotland system at the exact same time, and you look at the number of caps that each of them have got, it's very similar. So it's almost like they've just been there kind of rotating round. Like Craig Gordon had a long spell as the number one, and then there's different people coming in and out. And for Marshall to have been involved with the Scotland setup throughout all that period, and he never turned his back on Scotland, he never didn't turn up. How many times must David Marshall have turned up for Scotland and not even got a sniff of action? Like, he's just went there and basically trained with the goalies for months and years on end, but he never ever got that down. He just kept plugging away. So it is like without being romantic about it, it's like a Cinderella story, that a guy who's put so much into the national team to be that person who becomes the hero and does that for the country is great, and it's poetic, and it is a good story and a feel-good factor that everyone should buy into, really.
He's such a low-key character as well. I mean, even when they were doing the conga and everybody's singing his name, you almost got the feeling he was a wee bit embarrassed by it.
He was the first one to sit down, that's right, yeah.
I mean, I think that's the big thing. He's played third fiddle to McGregor and Gordon for so long, and as you say, he's stuck around, and I would still suggest that you could make a case for saying that Gordon is still a superior keeper, even at this age, to Marshall, but I don't think anybody would begrudge Marshall getting the gloves and keeping the gloves, regardless of whether there is a better keeper at the moment, because he's waited his turn. He's obviously been the man that's got Scotland there by virtue of the penalty save and his general performances in recent matches, and he absolutely deserves to be the guy in possession of the gloves when we go to the Euros, assuming he stays injury free, obviously. Yeah,
absolutely. Obviously, one of the things that's went viral is the video of them celebrating. You mentioned obviously the conga with David Marshall to Wigfield Saturday night, but the song that's obviously probably going to find itself at the top of the charts this week is certainly not in the top 10 anyway, is Baccarat's Yes Sir I Can Boogie, because of the way they celebrated. Now, last time England qualified for Euro 98 when we were there, they had Euro 96. Sorry. Thanks for correcting me, Anthony. They had Three Lions. They released that went to number one. Will we have a song for this? Surely we have to.
Let's hope it's more positive than Don't Come Back Too Soon with Delamitri. That was kind of preempting what was going to happen, eh? But
we don't have to come back this time.
Yeah, exactly. We're still here. So it's like, but nah, I've seen loads of things. I've seen a bit of chat about Lewis Capaldi releasing a song, or like, it would be good. It's a bit funny. Like, I don't know if countries still do that. Back in the last time Scotland qualified in '98, it was the done thing. But you were talking obviously earlier about the scenes afterwards, the guys celebrating in the dressing room and at the sort of party that they had afterwards. And to me, that's brilliant to see. Like that shows you, like, there's so many parallels that could be drawn between the Michael O'Neill Northern Ireland team, who did so well out of nothing, and this squad. Like, Michael O'Neill didn't have a great group of players. Arguably, we've got a much better group of players. We've got your likes of Tierney and your Robertsons and guys like that who are actually very, very talented players in their own right. But Steve Clarke has, as we said earlier, found that system. But the biggest thing that I took from that was how together the players were. I understand it's a massive thing, but they just looked like a band of brothers. Eh? Like, they just looked like bonded and like a really good group of mates. And if you can keep the majority of those guys together and take that to a tournament, then I just think you've got such a good chance if you've got a group of guys that are all pulling in the same direction. So yeah,
definitely. Hey, thanks to Kieran. Yes, the only way is up. I completely agree with you, mate. Well, hopefully we can kick on in this tournament. We talked about obviously the celebrations of the players and the backroom staff, but there's more to that. Like I say, there's a backroom staff. I'm happy for the people that, the unsung heroes that are getting to go to these tournaments. And obviously, Anthony, the profession that you're in as well, you're a sports writer. There's going to be people in the media that are going to get to cover this that maybe haven't covered major tournaments before. I mean, you've got to feel happy for the kind of people, yeah? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, when you cover a Scotland game, it's like, I know they say fans with laptops and all that, but it is Scotland games. You look around the press box and all the guys are standing singing the anthem and stuff, and you can sense that they are celebrating with the fans. I mean, obviously you've got to maintain a bit of professional decorum, but the press pack that go with Scotland home and away, you can tell everybody's just desperate for the national team to do well, and that's probably why when they fail there is a bit of a backlash that you could argue is a little bit over the top at times, just because people are so, including the press, are so desperate to get there. But there were only 3 newspaper journalists that made it to Serbia, because I think the recommendation was don't travel.
Yep.
But obviously some papers...
I think you have to isolate before you actually...
Yeah, there was a lot involved in terms of that. I don't know the specifics, but certainly it put a lot of other papers off travelling. So I think there was only the Daily Mail, the Times and the Scottish Sun that were present in terms of newspaper journalists anyway, when ordinarily there would have been another 5 or 6 there at least, and all the Sunday papers as well. So I think the 3 guys that were there felt pretty privileged. I saw a photo of Stephen McGowan of the Daily Mail put it on his social media, and I thought fair play to them, because these guys are there. I know they're there in a professional capacity, but they're also there because they want the national team to do well, and it was great for those guys. I mean, I've got friends as well that were gutted they couldn't be there for the reasons I sort of outlined, so there is a feeling of disappointment for them, because ordinarily they would have been there, and it must have been hard for them watching at home on telly knowing they should have been there. I've covered the national team a few times myself, but not on a regular basis like a lot of the guys who are literally at every game. So
yep.
Yeah, it's great for, I mean, that's a journalist perspective, but it's great for everybody involved with the national team. And I think it's going back to what Stephen was saying, I think there's definitely parallels to be drawn with Northern Ireland, because that was one thing that stuck out for me. I think with the greatest respect, when you can get a team with Stephen O'Donnell and Declan Gallagher, excellent Scottish Premiership players, but they're not top level players. Let's be honest, on paper this is a relatively, I wouldn't say mediocre, but it's lacking in stardust, this Scotland squad. You could argue that McGinn and Robertson are the 2 sort of standout names, but even then McGinn probably isn't a top class player. He's not maybe in the same league as a Milinkovic-Savic, for instance. Mm-hmm. So Scotland they've clearly performed to more than the sum of their parts to beat this Serbia team, and I think obviously that's what every Scotsman was saying, why can't we do what Northern Ireland are doing? And because Northern Ireland had on paper, a really mediocre group. They had Johnny Evans, who was probably their standout player in terms of being a top-level centre-back. But beyond that, it was... I mean, they even had some Scottish Premiership players that weren't even at the top of the Scottish Premiership. They had guys from the English Championship in there, and just guys. But they had a togetherness, and that's what got them. I mean, Aaron Hughes was still playing until well into his 30s.
Yep.
And, I mean, no disrespect to any of these guys, or indeed to any of the Scotland players, but I think when you can get something that means you're able to perform at that level as a team, when you don't have the top level superstars that certain teams that you're up against do have, it can carry you a long way. I mean, I'm not saying Scotland are going to do a Greece, but they're the prime example of a team that don't have any stars but can still find a way to progress. And I mean, at the moment, there's no European nations really taking things by the scruff of the neck. There's no... I mean, Spain had that sort of period in 2008, 2010, 2012 where they were the dominant nation and you thought they're untouchable. France obviously had their period in the late 90s, early 90s, but you wouldn't look at Europe. I mean, I suppose Belgium and England are probably the 2 teams at the minute you would look at, but even then you wouldn't say England are absolutely untouchable. I mean, Scotland proved that a couple of years ago when they nearly beat them.
Yep.
And obviously Belgium are a different level, but I mean, if Scotland could get a bit of momentum, there's no reason why they can't scrape their way out of the group stages. And if you get out of the group stages, get a kind draw, get a penalty shootout, you never know where it can take you.
The thing is, like with the same token as club football, the better you do in tournaments, it's like the coefficient, like the moving up that ranking, which Scotland have always been in my time, have always been like 20 plus. The further up the rankings you go, the easier the draws are that you get. So the same way that the Scottish coefficient, the better that the teams do in Europe, the easier it is the next year to do better in Europe. So if Scotland can do pretty well in this, they get an easier draw for the World Cup or the next. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It is a step-by-step process. It doesn't happen overnight, but we've had 22 years waiting for something like this to happen. So
if you trace it back, that's probably where it started to go wrong for Scotland, because I wouldn't say the players that they've had over the last 20 years are massively inferior to the players they had in the 90s. I'd say they're relatively similar calibre. We didn't have superstars in the 90s. We had Paul Lambert, John Collins, but beyond that, I'm not convinced we had any players that were massively superior to the ones we've had over the last 10, 20 years.
Well, even if you look at the Walter Smith and then first time round McLeish, that sort of time, where they had a great group then, and they had guys playing at a good level, and they seemed to be doing pretty well. But they were in a group with France, Italy, and Ukraine. Like, how are you going to get out that group?
That's the thing. We've ended up getting in difficult groups
because of the coefficient, or the points.
In the 98 and the 90s, Scotland were generally top seeds in the group because there was less nations.
Yeah.
All the Eastern European nations hadn't emerged yet. So Scotland were very often top seeds in the group. And they relinquished that. It was either in 2000 or 2002 when they failed to qualify, I think, for Euro 2000, and they slipped down. And ever since then, it's got progressively harder. They became second seeds, and they'd get into a playoff and not make it, and then they dropped into the third seeds. But they've effectively become fourth seeds, so they're up against three superior teams.
But this is the thing, but the Scotland fans, in the same way that a lot of Scottish football fans are the same way in thinking, is the Scottish fans still look at that Scottish national team and expect them to qualify. Whereas on paper, it's the same as and again, I'm not meaning this in an offensive way to any Aberdeen fans listening, but Aberdeen fans of a certain generation still look at their club and deep down hope that they were going to challenge the old firm, when in reality, that you look at the budgets, the history over the last 20 years, like Aberdeen are a good team in Scottish football terms, but they're never going to compete at that level. So to expect them to do that is ridiculous. But the Scottish national team, they never ever seem to have that understanding. Everyone expected them to qualify despite being fourth in the group. So you look at some of the results that Strachan potentially got with Scotland, maybe getting them to finish second or third in a group. That's actually above and beyond what you should do.
The course. They didn't overachieve, but they didn't underperform massively.
100%.
I wouldn't say any of them have massively underachieved. I include Levine and Burley in that, because generally they finished where they were expected to finish. But there is naturally this expectation on Scotland, and that expectation is going to go through the roof regardless of what happens in the Euros, because they've made the tournament now. So whoever comes after Steve Clarke, it's going to have big sort of expectations to meet up to, if you like.
Absolutely, guys. So as you can see scrolling across the screen, we asked the question, will there be a song for this tournament that we're going to in the Euros? Who would you have sing it? Who would sing the song? Who would you have? I mean, there was Badil and Skinner that done the English one. We've had Delimitri do, like you say, Don't Come Home Too Soon. Hi to Murphy Mick as well. This is glorious, listening to Stephen praising the national team, so he's appreciating your positivity in the Scotland squad. I will give you the chance to counteract that and talk negatively of them in a minute. My motivational team talk before the England game would be comprised of Sir Alex Ferguson, Sir Andy Murray, Irvin Welsh, Frankie Boyle, and then the actor Brian Cox. That would be some team talk, wouldn't it? Thanks very much for the comments. Do keep them coming. Who would have sing the song? So, like I said, Stephen, now's your chance to maybe talk down Scotland, because after the euphoric performance on Thursday, we then went into the game yesterday against Slovakia and we got beat 1-0.
Well, Murphy McKenzie is going to be delighted, because I'm not going to talk them down. I watched that game against Slovakia, and I thought again Scotland were really good. They made 8 changes to the team. Like, again, as Anthony said, that a lot of that might be down to the fact that probably some boys were still in their bed, but it was 8 changes. It just shows you that in the same way, I think we talked a couple of weeks ago about what Gerrard's done at Rangers in terms of he's got a system, and he now gets the players to buy into that system, and if one guy drops out, someone else comes in, one guy drops out, someone else comes in. And it looks like Scotland have potentially got that same sort of thing now. So they had Considine come in, they had Cooper come in, and I don't think Scotland, they didn't look like a team that had made 8 changes. They just looked like they'd continued on that sort of wave. And with a bit more quality in the final third, they could have potentially been 1 or 2 up before the goal came. I mean, the goal, again, was really unlucky. It took a deflection off Kenny McLean and kind of nestled in the bottom corner, but I didn't see anything. And again, I'm looking at it as not a partisan, tartan army guy. I'm looking at it purely as someone just watching a game of football. I was really impressed with them again. I thought they did really well. And if someone had said to to Steve Clarke and the Scotland players, you would be at the final game of this the league that they're in, Nations League, and you would have it in your own hands to still be top of that group, they would have accepted that any day of the week. So I don't think that anyone should be any sort of downtrodden on the Scotland performance or kind of what they've been doing over the last couple of games. The result wasn't great, but I think they were really good.
Yeah, so you mentioned there was 8 changes. Anthony, we go on, we play against Israel on Wednesday night. So there's a comment just come through, actually, we might actually make pot 2 for the World Cup draw if we beat Israel. Do you think that he will, when I say he, I mean Steve Clarke, do you think he will resort back to the team that played against Serbia? Will he play strongest team on Wednesday night, do you think?
I would imagine so, yeah. I mean, give or take 1 or 2 maybe, but I think he would probably revert. I mean, he'll want to change it because the guys played yesterday, so again, he'll want to change it up. He'll not want to annoy club managers by overplaying any of the players. So you might find that the 3 guys that started yesterday, who was it, McGinn? Who were the 3 that stayed on Thursday?
Tierney, McGinn and Christie.
Yeah, you might find those 3 drop out because he won't want to annoy any club managers, I wouldn't have thought. But by the same token, there is obviously a lot riding on tomorrow if they can get the result and top the group. So I think it'll certainly be pretty close to the team we saw last Thursday in Serbia.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're 45 minutes almost into the show, and all we've done is talk about Scotland. It is International Week, and I'm sure we'll talk about them next week as well. But there was some domestic games in Scotland over the weekend. Obviously, with it being the Betfred Cup, we had some games to point out. Raith beat Cowdenbeath 1-0. This is a game I want to talk to you about, Stephen, because you know my thoughts on this. I wasn't happy the way that the SFA handled the COVID situation. And a club I felt for was Kelty Hearts. Now, Kelty beat Brecon 2-0. Now, in all fairness, that could have well been a playoff game had COVID not interrupted. Did Brecon maybe feel a wee bit lucky to still be in that league?
Yeah, my feelings on Brecon are pretty the same as yourself. I think that I do feel bad. Like, there's nothing to say that Kelty would have beaten Brora. I think they are quite a evenly matched 2 teams. I think they're both pretty good. But I think that result at the weekend, if someone had said to you a couple of years ago that you're going to have a tournament that you're going to invite the Lowland League or the kind of non-league teams into, and for them to go into a game against Brecon and nobody was surprised that Kelty beat them. I was surprised it was only 2-0. I just think that it shows you, like what we discussed, I think a couple of weeks ago now, that there are so many dinosaurs involved in Scottish football who are maybe in charge of teams in the Lowland, the lower echelons of kind of League Two, who are quite happy to have their teams there. They're Brecon potentially, although they're in a bad run of results, they're probably not in that category because they got rid of Simon Donnelly and I forget who the manager was. Oh. Yeah, Mark Wilson. Yeah. They got rid of the 2 of them and they actually gave the job to Michael Payton, who is, I think he's only 30. He's an ex-Aberdeen striker.
He's got quite an experienced assistant come in, hasn't he?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to remember who it is.
Jerry, the guy who, I think he was he involved with Hartley at Dundee? Jerry McCabe, that's him. So he's got him, he's an experienced guy, but it does show a little bit that they're trying to do something a bit different, and they're not just going for a run-of-the-mill person. But there are other teams in that division that it baffles me that you have teams like Kelty, and then again, people will point at Kelty and say, look how much money's been chucked at them. They've got Barry Ferguson as a manager. They're bringing players in from the Championship in Scotland. But Kelty got beat the week before by East Kilbride in that league as well. So East Kilbride are another team who have got ex-professional players or current professional players. Paul Payton, I think, plays for them. And they've brought in a few big names to their team as well. So there are teams in that lower divisions who have got ambitions and they want to go places. So as I said a couple of weeks ago, either compete with them or get out their way. Stop trying to use bureaucracy to kind of stop these guys progressing to where they potentially could be.
No, I mean, I'm a big fan of the pyramid scheme, and I think obviously what happened during the COVID era, I mean, decisions had to be made, and I think it just maybe made a bit of a mockery of the whole, what the pyramid scheme stands for, obviously allowing these teams to progress up the ladder. Are you a fan of the pyramid scheme, Anthony? Is it a good thing for clubs like Kelty Hearts, Brora Rangers, East Kilbride, like you say, Stephen?
If they're allowed to utilise it as it's supposed to be done. But obviously that didn't happen in the summer. Yeah, so of course it's good. It allows sort of upwardly mobile clubs to smash through the glass ceiling, if you like, and come into the league. I mean, Edinburgh City are the prime example of a team that have come up and held their own, and not only held their own, they've been one of the standout teams in League Two for certainly the past couple of years, and I'm sure we'll see them getting promoted at some point if they keep going the way they're going.
Yeah. Annie Lennox or Shirley Manson sing the Euros 2020 tune? That'd be a good one. Bobby,
Simmy, I was actually, just when you were talking about the pyramid system there earlier,
sorry.
I actually had a conversation today with David Livy, who
on the
wrote in
comments earlier.
Yeah, so we were talking as well, like, see in a country the size of Scotland, why do they not make all football into the pyramid system? Like, why do they not bring the amateur game into the same pyramid system and then basically have a pyramid under the Lowland League as it is? And you do the same in the Highland League, use the amateur leagues in like Aberdeen and stuff.
The pathway for Pennycook amateurs.
Well, this is it. One day Pennycook amateurs could be there, but it's no. But you know what I mean? Like, there's so many different factions within Scottish football kind of fighting against each other. Well, why not just bring everything under one banner and use it as a pyramid for teams that they want to do that?
I mean, I see the positives to that, but there's going to be obviously restraints that are going to hold amateur clubs back, like the ground, for instance. There's so many regulations that you need to meet, obviously, to have a seated area, to have it enclosed, to have certain like toilets accessible for referees, etc., and travelling fans.
But the thing is, though, Simmy, like when you get to a certain stage, like if you want to push your club on, even if you are an amateur team and you have the facility to have that set up there, you'll go and find the money for somewhere. You'll go and get sponsorship. If you've got an opportunity to get into that Lowland League, you'll go and find something. And there are going to be teams who are happy just being at the level that they are, and that's fine. But if you do want to push on, then the opportunity should be there to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Bobby Gillespie, also a good choice, but he might be past it. Thanks very much for all your comments. Do keep them coming. Another game in the Betfred Cup was Hibs 4, Dundee 1, Stephen. Now, that's quite... there's a bit of a story after that, isn't it? Because they actually drew each other in the next round of the Cup.
Yeah.
How'd that work?
So Hibs went through as group winners, and Dundee were one of the best placed second place teams, so they went through as an unseeded team. So Hibs were the seeded, Dundee unseeded. And then it just so happened that because the way that the draw goes, it's a seed against an unseed. So, and that just so happened that despite having played that same day, they got drawn out together. So,
I mean, there's nothing more Scottish football in that story, mate. I'm sorry, but you beat someone in the previous round of the Cup and you get drawn them in the next round of the Cup.
And in the Nations League as well.
Exactly.
It's not just Scottish.
It's not just Scottish football.
Well, I'm sorry, mate.
The Nations League didn't have Rod Stewart giving it the old one of these, though, so that's the difference.
Looking ahead to some of the games that are coming up, obviously after the international break. Friday night, Anthony, a huge game at East End Park, Dunfermline against Hearts. That's going to be a cracker, isn't it?
Yeah, an interesting game. As I sort of alluded to last week, I'm intrigued to see how Hearts handle it, because it's a game that Hearts, if they are going to run away with the league, which I suppose Robbie Nielsen will be hoping that they're able to do, and the supporters will obviously be hoping that they can do, then this is a sort of, not quite an acid test, but it's certainly it'll give us a good indication of if they are just going to scoosh the league or if they're going to make heavy weather of it, if you like, because this is probably... It's not necessarily the hardest game they'll have faced, because you could argue Dundee and Inverness on paper were hard games as well, as was Arbroath away, but certainly Dunfermline away is, I suppose, one of the trickiest games you're going to get in this division, and if Hearts were to go there, even win 1-0, then you would say they're looking really hot in terms of winning this league, and I dare say they'll win the league whatever happens on Friday night, but certainly a wee setback if they were to lose. Suddenly it asks a few questions of the management and the players and what have you, and they just want to maintain that harmony that they've had over the past few weeks, and certainly since the season started. So for Hearts, it's just about maintaining momentum and maintaining this positive vibe, because with Hearts, it takes one bad result and the whole thing changes. Suddenly the players are rubbish, Robbie Nielsen doesn't know what he's doing, so they just want to keep all that sort of nonsense on the back burner, if you like, and get the momentum going, get their noses in front in the title race, which obviously they've not got yet. If they were to win on Friday, I dare say that would put them clear at the top of the league as the only team with 100% record.
I think as well that you're looking at it that Robbie Nielsen and his coaching staff will want to maintain the good start that they've had for personal reasons but in the back of their mind they will also be thinking about this points per game thing as well. So they want to get as many points on the board as possible at the start of the season. And in the previous seasons gone by, it wasn't a 27 game season, it was a 36 game season, so there's less fixtures, and you've got it in the back of your head that it's not looking likely at this moment in time, but potentially things could change again and the leash could get stopped. So you need to rattle as many points into the board early doors as you can, and then that gives you as best as possible. And people will look at that and go, well, surely that's what every team wants to do anyway. But I think in a season like this, it's even more important that the start that you make, you build on it, and you keep going, and you don't take the foot off the gas at all. You go pedal to the metal for the entire time, and then whatever comes of that comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing. Hearts don't want to get in a situation where they're doing well enough, but other teams are top because they've played more games, because Hearts have been progressing in the cup competitions, and then you end up in a situation like when Partick are relegated because they're not top in terms of they've got games in hand, but they're not actually top of the league, and they end up missing out on promotion that way. So I mean, anything could happen in terms of how this season pans out. You'd hope it gets finished on basis of playing 27 full matches and the rightful winner goes up, but they have got to be mindful of getting a good lead and getting away so that there's no uncertainty going into the new year.
Get the points on the board. Apparently there's a Glasgow band called Cherry Wave. They've released a Euro 2020 tune already. It's on YouTube, but because they're not a pop outfit, we don't really know about it. So that's comments coming in. Maybe we'll see more and more of these kind of tunes. DIVORCE by Billy Connolly for when we play England. It's an old classic.
The most iconic one was, for me, it's not specifically attributed to Scotland, obviously, but I like the Dario G one at France 98.
Carnival de Paris.
But it's amazing how like music you can relate to certain things, and as soon as I hear that song, you're right. That's all I think about. It's maybe not as high tempo, but
it also reminds you of this.
Yes, Anthony. What is that you have in your hand?
I was just about to say that. It reminds me of that day at Hampden, where my good friend and colleague Anthony Brown has written a beautiful book. But no, it does. It takes you straight back to that day, because 98 they won the cup. That was obviously the song, and I think the guy who was in charge of the music at Hampden probably just happened to play it. It wasn't but for any Hearts fan or anyone who was involved in that day, that song will always bring back memories of such a wonderful time in Hearts' history. Which has been documented beautifully by my good friend and colleague Anthony Brown.
That wasn't planned, I promise. It was just an opportune moment.
Other games happening this weekend, a couple of big ones. Hibs are at Easter Road. They will be playing Celtic. Neil Lennon brings his team back to Easter Road. Is that going to be a straightforward one for Celtic, Anthony, do you think? Or will Hibs, Jack Ross, be looking to rebound after a couple of bad results, do you think?
I can't see it being a straightforward one for Celtic. I mean, certainly they're capable of going there and winning 2 or 3-0, but in current form, you wouldn't necessarily expect that to happen. I think it'll be quite a close game. Obviously, Celtic's players will be coming back from international duty. How fresh, how sharp are they going to be? Hibs, generally, they've had a lot of questions asked about the way they tend to, well, I would say under Jack Ross, they've maybe not done as well against the stronger teams in the league, your Celtics and Rangers, as what they maybe did under Neil Lennon and Alan Stubbs. So there's definitely pressure on Hibs to try and pull it. I know they had the win yesterday, but if they were suddenly to go Aberdeen, they lost to Aberdeen, they lost to Hearts, and they lose to Celtic, then people are going to be saying Hibs are not equipped for big games, even though Celtic should win the game on paper. Yep. But I think we'll see a performance from Hibs, whether they're... I mean, they took points off Rangers earlier when they drew at Easter Road, am I right in saying? It was a draw, yeah. So, I mean, they're certainly capable on their day if they turn up and play as well as they can, and Celtic are not quite at it, and Hibs are definitely capable.
The only thing is, though, like the last Celtic-Hibs game at Parkhead, I think that's the easiest game Celtic have had all season. Like, I don't even think Celtic had to get out of second gear. Like, Hibs did, the game plan was all wrong. And I really rate Jack Ross, and I think he's got a great squad there. And again, I've said this a couple of weeks ago, I fear that they're going to potentially get into that no man's land. They're not going to drop any further down than fourth, but they're not going to get anywhere close to Aberdeen. And it could get to January or February and you're looking at cup competitions only, and a bad result, you're only one game away from a bad result in the cup, and good night Vienna, your season's over. So
Hibs are a good team, but you say they've got a great squad. I'm not convinced this is a vintage Hibs squad. I know they've had a great start, or a good start to the season, but I think they're probably... Defensively, I quite like the look of them. McGinn, good, steady, solid right back. They've got a good goalkeeper, Marciano, and I think across the back they're pretty sound. Maybe left back, you've got Stevenson, who's getting on a little bit, and Doig, who he's obviously still young. He looks a good prospect, but he's obviously still got a bit to go yet before you would say he's at a level where you could...
The thing is, though, look at what they've invested. Like, you compare that to other teams. Every other team have been slicing their budget and then tightening the belt. Hibs have gone and spent money on players. You know what I mean? Like, they've got guys.
I'm comparing them to a team that's going to push for third. I would still say
Hibs have had better squads over the years. 100% agree with that. But I'm just saying, in terms of what's around them, you look at teams like Motherwell and stuff. Like, Motherwell probably managed to just about hold on to their budget. Hibs went and spent money on Nisbet and McGuinness from St Mirren. So, like, if it doesn't work out for them and things don't go to where the fans really want it to go, the only person you can blame is potentially the manager, because he's been backed by his board, and he's got kind of.
I know they certainly spend money. I'm not accusing them of that. I do think they've backed the manager pretty well, pretty much over the last 4 or 5 years since the new regime came in, if you like. So I wouldn't have any gripes with that. I don't look at Hibs and say they're a formidable team. They're a team for anybody out with anybody in the league. I mean, Boyle, if he's on his day, can kill any team in Scotland. I think a lot of Hibs fans will disagree, but I think the Scott Allan situation is obviously a massive blow for them. I think even last season, he was getting a lot of criticism for not playing at full pelt, and I think now, obviously, there's underlying issues, if you like. But he, even on a bad day, was still capable of creating you 2 goals a game. He gives you something that no one else in that. I mean, Newell's a good player,
but Scott Allan's a maverick, though. He's a maverick guy. He's one of these guys that if you've got, I think if you'd had Gogic playing with Scott Allan, they would have such a good balance in that midfield. Or
even a third midfielder in there with them. But I just think
if they'd had somebody kind of doing the dirty work and just saying to Scott Allan, you just go and express yourself, you go and get the ball and do what you do, then you're going to see the best of what he is, because he's not a worker, he's not a grafter.
He gives the team the X factor, though.
Yes,
when he's not in the team, you're reliant on Mallon can do it now and again. Newell, as I said, is a very good playmaker, but he's a bit deeper. I think he's at his best playing deep. Allen gives you something going forward. You've got Boyle, when he's on it, is unstoppable, one of the best players in the country for me. Doidge is a goal scorer. For me, he obviously does a job for the team, but he's not a sort of sparky player, if you like. You're relying on this bit.
This is the thing, you're relying on service for a guy like Doidge. He's going to need Boyle to be on form, and whoever's playing on the other side, and you need creative midfielders to kind of create chances for him. He's not, as you say, he's not. Even Canberra used to at points just create things out of nothing for himself.
He was
I don't think Doidge is like that.
Doidge has got a good goal in him, but he's not going to just. He's not the sort of guy who's routinely.
But the thing, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you with what you're saying. That it's not a Hibs team on paper that you would think, these guys are going to be world beaters, but they are on paper, and in reality, the fourth best team in the country. So,
looking at it on paper, I expected Hearts to not necessarily beat Hibs, but I expected them to give them a game, which for the 4th team in Scotland, you would expect them to be the Championship favourites.
Yeah,
I just think Hearts and Hibs very similar. You could argue that Hearts have got even more sort of players of pedigree, if you like. But I mean, the Hibs should, all being well. Again, I like Jock Ross as well. I think he's a good manager, but I think they need to eke out a wee bit more in terms of results against the stronger teams if they really want to push Aberdeen. But I think they're going to. I mean, Aberdeen are not a vintage side either, but they've just got that. They've got that know-how to finish third, and I don't know if Hibs have quite got that yet. Hibs seem to go on runs and then just drop off. And I mean, I know even Aberdeen do that as well, but I just think Aberdeen have got that wee bit more about them in terms of if it came down to a straight fight between those 2 teams for third, which I would imagine it probably will. Yeah,
now we've talked quite a bit about Hibs there. Thanks to Kieran for the message. He's a Celtic fan, and we've been talking about music quite a bit as well on the show today. Sunshine on Leith is a great tune for football, and we talked about obviously how you hear a certain tune and it reminds you of a certain day, maybe like for Carnival de Paris, the Hearts Cup win in '98. That, for any Hibs fans, Sunshine on Leith must take them back to Hampden. I watched actually a video, I was just flicking through social media, and when Alan Stubbs goes up to collect his medal, the announcer at Hampden Park starts Sunshine on Leith. Every Hibs fan, whether they're a Hibs supporter or not, with their scarf up in the air singing that song, it's magical, Anthony. And were you there that day when...
I was. I still it's one of the most incredible scenes, possibly the most incredible scene I've ever seen in a match I've been at. I mean, you're talking about the song. I just can't stop thinking. I spoke about this with you before when we did an interview a few months ago. The fans on the pitch at the end, that for me was the big thing from Hibs winning the cup. I loved that. I know they got pilloried in the media and what have you, and I can understand why, because obviously it was a safety risk and what have you. But looking back now, it was magical. All these fans invading the National Stadium pitch. It was just an incredible It's what that final will always be synonymous with, the chaos at the end. But I know Hibs got slaughtered for it, but for me, Hibs are right to sort of brag about the exuberance and all that. I thought it was a fantastic scene, and Sunshine on Leith just capped it all off. When you see that rendition at the end,
For the record, I thought it was absolutely terrible what those fans did, and I think the song is a disgrace.
Don't condone it in any way. None of us do.
Get your maroon glasses off.
Another big game this weekend on Sunday. We'll touch on this very quickly because I'm aware of the time. Is Rangers Aberdeen at Ibrox. Are Aberdeen going to be the only club that can maybe out with Celtic? Maybe stop Rangers from running away with it, Stephen? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think Aberdeen have got a good chance. I mean, Derek McInnes, a great manager. He's just one of these guys who, like, year after year, he hits the targets that he probably needs to hit every single year. He's got some very similar to Scotland. He's got a group of guys who graft for him, who he can ask a number of them to play in a different position, play a different role, and they go and just do it for him. Like Johnny Hayes, move him to left back, that's fine. Move him to left wing, no problem. Andy Considine, play centre half this week, go and play left back next week. These guys never blink an eyelid, they just go and do it. Similar to Jack Ross in a way that the Aberdeen fans have questioned McInnes on his record again in big games. So this Rangers game is for Aberdeen fans is massive. The rivalry between Rangers and Aberdeen's kind of well documented, but I think if they could go and get a result there, it really kind of opens things up, because if Celtic then go and get a result, or Celtic first get a result at Easter Road,
Saturday,
it puts a bit of pressure on it, and it's Rangers. Like the Aberdeen game at the start of the season when Rangers played them, it was a tight game, really tight game, and that was when Aberdeen were in poor form. So you never know. It's an exciting. Those are two really good games at the weekend. Like those for Scottish football, kind of showcase.
Two box office games, but I think Rangers will win heavily.
You think so?
4 or 5 now.
We'll find out next Monday night.
Aberdeen fans, his name is Anthony Brown on Twitter.
We're almost out of time. There's one thing I want to touch on, and we talked about this off air, Stephen. You brought this to my attention. I heard rumours of it, but this is superb. We've talked about teams like Celtic Hearts and stuff. We've talked about the Scottish pyramid system. Down south, Hollywood comes to Wrexham. Tell us about this. This is class.
Yeah, so Wrexham have been bought over by Ryan Reynolds, who's Deadpool, like the Hollywood actor.
I mean, this is a Hollywood A-lister. I mean, there was rumours of it, and I thought, it's just a throwaway story, but it's actually went through, is it?
Yes, it's done. I think it's been ratified. It's just waiting for FA to kind of clear it as the good and proper test, or whatever they call it. But so Deadpool guy and Rob McElhenney, who I think is another American actor who is in some sitcom, who I think between them they've got about $250 million like valuation between the two of them. So they've bought that club, but the club was owned by the fans, so like they were a fan owned kind of group, and so they had to go to the fans and basically put it to them and say, can we please buy your club? But the fans voted, 98% I think of them voted to sell it on to these guys. So, but I think the plan is, they're doing it just because I think the two of them are big sports guys, they're into football, and they wanted to just have something as a bit of a toy. But they're also doing a Netflix documentary along with it. So they're going to obviously create content out of that, try and obviously increase the profile of a club like Wrexham. And I mean, it can only be good for football to kind of, like, you're hoping these aren't just like some faceless sheiks that are going to turn up and like run the club into the ground, or Lithuanian businessmen that are going to do similar. These are you would hope reputable guys who've got maybe a bit of skin in the game. But yeah, I mean, seeing the old, the boy bootlegger, it's always on social media. He's a big Wrexham fan, so seeing him and Ryan Reynolds rubbing shoulders will be quite entertaining.
I'm sure the documentary, is that the Hearts one will be on tonight, is it?
Yeah, yes, it's on tonight. Second episode's on tonight at 9:00. No, that's a great story coming out of Wrexham. I'm sure the supporters will marvel in that news.
Oh, Simmy.
Sorry, guys. Anyway, that wraps up another show. Thanks for everybody that's tuned in. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks to Anthony. Thanks to Stephen. We'll see you same time next week, 7:00 for the Play On podcast. Enjoy your week.